afternoon, folks. Okay, so today's tutorial is on a English rose, and this is the rose that I will be demonstrating how to make. So basically, the English rose is a very generalized term because there's so many varieties of English roses. For instance, the David Austin rose, which has all the little loops of petals in the center, that is considered an English rose. So I guess you'd say this is a very basic English rose, but it's also, I find it's gorgeous, and it's actually pretty easy to make. So I'm going to be going over the size of ball I use and size of petal cutters, veining tool, and various other tools. And also I'm going to be going over an alternative to making a calyx from floral tape rather than gum paste, because sometimes with gum paste I like the look of it, but it can break as you're making an arrangement on a cake or something like that, and sometimes it kind of gets me down because it's like, oh, it broke and all that kind of stuff. So this is an alternative that I learned from a book that I have. And if you look from the side, it just looks very, sorry, I'm trying to get that in the camera. It looks very natural. So, and then what you would do is you can just add some rose leaves to that as well, and no one would know the difference. So, but I enjoy this technique a lot. Okay, so I'm going to share also the colors that I use. I decided to go with a yellow because I really don't use a lot of yellow. I don't work with a lot of yellow. And so I thought this would be a nice change. So, so the yellow that I used is Americolor Egg Yellow, and then Rainbow Dust Progel, just regular yellow. So this is kind of almost like a lemon yellow. And I mixed those two together, and they turned out to be a fantastic color. So, okay, so I'm going to have this listed, the sizes that I used for my cutters as well. So this, the smallest one, actually this comes in a set, and you can find this on Amazon. The smallest one is 1 1/4 by 1 7/8. The second one is 1 1/2 and 2 1/8, and the third and final is 1 3/4 and 2 1/4. So that's the width and the height of each of those. And then the veiner I got off of Etsy, and I will put a link as to who I bought this from. So I like to switch out different veiners for different type of roses and peonies and things like that. So I'm always looking for a new veiner. So okay, so I have my paste here, and it's fairly thin. And if you have a pasta machine, I go by number 4 for this. If you want to go a little thinner, you can. There's certain flowers that do need to have thinner gum paste petals, so, but this is a number 4. If you don't have one, just make sure you roll it out fairly thin. All right, so I'm gonna go on and start cutting out my petals. Okay, so I cut all of my petals that I'll need to build this rose, and so I'm gonna go over how many that I have of each. So of the smallest cutter, I have 10 petals, and I have them under my bag. So here's the 10. And then the second cutter, I have 15. So I have them here and over on my second bag here. And then the third and final cutter, I have 12, and that is in this last bag here. So what I want to do is I want to kind of give them some shape, and I want to have kind of like a slit in this petal, so it's not going to be completely round. And what I do is I just take the end part, and don't worry that it gets kind of scraggly. You can always take care of that later on. So from here, what I do is I soften the edges of the petals inside the bag. If you looked at my other tutorials, you'll notice that I do this just so that it's easier on your ball tool and your hand, and it really gives a really nice softness to the petal. So it can be a bit time consuming if you have a lot of petals, but I think it's totally worth it. Okay, so I have all of my petals, and I also covered my bulb in piping gel. I want to really make sure that it's really covered on there. I'm finding that piping gel works better than Crisco on the bulb, so and which is actually really nice. Works really great. And this is a 2-inch bulb. You can have a smaller bulb if you want. If you did have a smaller bulb, you would just use a smaller set of petals, and with the same amount of petals, it would just be on a smaller scale. Okay, so let's first start with our 5 petals. And I'm using a cell stick to kind of push the gum paste farther out. It has a lot of friction, which makes it push out, which is actually kind of nice, and kind of gives it a little bit of a raggedy look to it, which I actually like. But if you don't like the raggedy look, you can always trim it up a bit with your scissors. Okay, so here we have them. And what I want to do is I want to focus on covering that center. I don't want to see the center at all. So I am going to just place my first petal here, and I'm not really pressing it down very much at all. And get my little brush wet here, and then I'm just going to wet that part of the petal, and I'm going to layer it. So I'm going to put a second petal on. And I'm trying to keep that they're evenly well distributed. Sometimes it's a little bit hard. It takes a little bit of practice. Okay, I just want to really focus on covering that center. And at this point, I'm going to place the last petal on top of this one, but I want to tuck it underneath the first petal. So I'm going to pop that first petal up a bit. And I'm just going to try to sneak that guy in underneath. Okay. And then there we go. We have kind of like a little pinwheel design going on here. You might find that your hands working with piping gel may be a little bit sticky, so I always keep a rag around. Okay, so for the second set, you're gonna start using these flower formers or petal formers. These are really great. I will have a link. I'm gonna start having links of where I get everything from. This is fairly small. I think this is a 1 5/8 inch circle, and this is, I think, less than 2. So I'm going to start using the smaller ones for the next 5, because I do want to have them curve. And then for the larger ones, I'm going to start using these as well. Okay, so what I want to do is when I place them in here, I really want them to curve from the top down. So I'm going to have the top of the petal inside the cup, whereas versus if I had it more where the bottom, from the mid to bottom, is in the cup. We'll go over that as we get to our larger petals. And what I like to do is, because I have to let these sit for about, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, maybe anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. As these are setting, I'm going to start working on my other petals and then putting them in their cups. That way they're already done and I can start placing them on the bulb instead of doing a lot of waiting to have your petals firm up. Okay, so also I'm going to repeat the same process with the second set, where I want them to have a really nice curve up on top, because they're kind of going to hover over the bulb of the flower. So they're going to be kind of they're going to have space in between there, and they're going to be kind of hovering over. And I'll show you what I mean by that. But I want them to have a really nice curve. The only way for them to do that is with this curve. So here we have our fourth set, and this is the second cutter, and there was to be 15 of the second cutter, so this is actually a number, this is 5, so that would be, we have 5 more to go. And I'm going to do the same thing where I want the curve to be farther up the petal. And then we have the second cutter, we have 5 more. And then this is when we start placing them a bit differently in the cups. Okay, so the difference with these for the second cutter is what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just folding the tops back, and I want them to kind of rest with that folded part kind of bent over the edge. So they're not completely all the way in the cup. Okay, so they're kind of hovering over the edge where that fold is at. Okay. And also a helpful note is I like to put the petals in the cups as how they are on my direction. So I'll have 5 here and then another 5, so I can keep track of where I'm at and when I need to start changing the petals based on how I want it to look. So and I have gotten confused by what petal is what, so that's why I do that, just to keep my mind organized. Okay, so I have here my second set of 5 petals, which is from the first petal cutter, and I like that they're kind of sitting on their own. They're nice and curled, and that's what I want. So I think I had these in for about maybe 15 minutes. So I'm just going to wet these in kind of a V shape right at the bottom. And then I'm going to place them at one of the seams. Honestly, it doesn't really matter which seam you pick. And I'm going to just kind of have it resting a little bit above the top. And I'm going to tuck these underneath each other. There seems to be enough space for that. Ooh, okay. Okay, so and then I'm just going to make sure that they just adhere really nicely. So as you can see, you're going to be able to see your first set, which is right there. Now we're going to move on to the second cutter with 5 petals. And we're just going to do the same thing. And what I'm doing is I'm just placing it a little bit above the last set. As you can see, it's just kind of standing there. But that's what I want, actually. And then I'm just making sure that they're stuck at the bottom. So as I'm pressing down at the bottom, they're going to start to pop a little bit up, which that's fine. That's completely okay. I want to see a little bit of space actually between the layers. So this is the second set of the second petal. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start lowering the petals a little bit down from the last set. This gives it the illusion that it's in the process of opening. And if that happens, you just stick it back on. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it upside down. I'm just going to hang it upside down. But before I do that, I want to add the final set of the second cutter. These are the ones that we had flipped a little bit, where we just folded the tops and they weren't completely in the cups. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually lower these a bit. And as time goes by, the thing is that you can either increase your petal size or increase the amount of petals, because as it gets bigger, you're going to find that you're not going to have enough petals to go completely around and they won't meet. And so this is what's happening here, is that they're not completely meeting, and it's because the bulb is getting bigger. So which is fine, because after a while, once, you're not going to really notice that with so many petals on it. And as it's drying, I like to kind of manipulate the petals and try to get them to dry in a certain way. Okay, so then we're going to move on to the larger and the last petal. And we're going to start with a five petals. And these are the largest, so they will go around. And then we're going to finish off with 7. Okay, so this one's going to be very similar to the last set we just put on, but they're going to be placed a little bit farther up in the cup. Okay, so now we are going to apply the last 12 petals on our, scratch that. Okay, so now we're going to apply the last 12 petals on our rose. And like I said, so you're going to start with 5 petals for the largest cutter and then end with 7. Okay, so it's been sitting, it's pretty well set. The petals are drying really nicely, so I'm going to just apply these farther down. I could probably bring them up just a tad bit. And they're wanting to fall. So what I'm going to do is, when this happens, I will start applying them upside down. It just really helps a lot if they want to start just peeling off. So, okay, so this is what it looks like. And so I have this gap here. What I want to do is I want to start there with the last set. So I'm just going to put that on the side and grab the last 7. And if your petals are starting to kind of look like this, as it's sitting up, what you can do is just make a hook from your wire and hang it upside down somewhere. And that will help to keep it from falling away like that. Okay, so now I want to see where I'm going to start again. So like I said, I'm going to start where it doesn't really overlap very well. And I didn't, like I said, sometimes you have to really make sure you're distributing the petals evenly. So, but like I said, it's an easy fix. So I'm going to start right there. And then also what I'm going to do before I continue, before I actually forget, if you have a petal that is large and you want to move it farther down, you're going to find that the end of the petal is going to hit your wire. So what I do is I just cut the end off, and not too far, but so that it doesn't really hit, the wire doesn't really get in the way, and no one will ever know. So that's also an easy fix too. So I'm going to continue what I was doing earlier, and I'm gonna put those like just farther down, and just tuck one underneath. And you can overlap or you can tuck underneath, just whatever you'd like. And then for the final petal, and there we have it. We have a really nice spiral look going on. Just want to make sure that gets really nicely adhered to that base. Okay, so here we have it. So we can start just manipulating the petals so that it really opens up. It really gives the look of this blossoming rose opening up. And also, okay, so I have here a rack that I use for many different things. I use it to hang blossoms or to hang roses, whatever kind of flower that needs to set. I also place roses and things like that on top, and I use several different types of cups. So I'm going to show you. So this is the rose, our rose that we just finished, and it's been sitting upside down for a good, I would say, half an hour, and that's a really good amount of time for it to set, and make sure that your petals are not going to start flopping over like they were before this. So I'm just kind of, I want them to be a little bit open, but not necessarily too open. So what I do is I take just some pieces of paper towel, and I just kind of, I don't know, just stick them in an area that, I don't stick them too far deep, but I just stick them in areas where I think there needs to be some space. And let's see, maybe right there. And you can also use pieces of a makeup wedge. You just cut them into smaller pieces, and those work well as well too. I just find this easier just to get a hold of, and then you can just toss them out when you're finished with them. So I just want to make sure that some of the layers are a little bit separated from the ones below it, just to give it some space. But this technique works really well. And we always have paper towels on hand, so that's a good thing. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna let this set overnight, and then we're gonna go over dusting and then making the floral tape calyx. All right, so stay tuned. Okay, so here we have our English rose, and it's really nice and dry. It's set up really nice. So I'm going to take out pieces of paper towel just to help them dry the way I wanted the petals to look. So it's really nice and open. And then I'm going to dust, and I just want to focus on the middle area. So I have here a couple of colors that I've been using. So I have here a sunflower, a Roxy Rich buttercream, or I'm sorry, buttercup. It's kind of a very pale yellow, and a Global Sugar Art Elite Color. It's a very strong looking yellow. Okay. So I already have my palette here, and it's just a paper towel with just a little bit of my colors here, and I'm just going to kind of mix them up, and I'm going to add a little bit of the buttercup into that to kind of lighten it up. And then I think I'm going to put a little bit of melon in there, just to kind of give it a little bit of a pinkish hue. And then also I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to the outer, maybe the outer petals, so right here maybe. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to start very lightly. I don't want to oversaturate my brush. And I'm just working the edge of the brush onto the edge of the petal. And as you can see, I'm just rubbing, really just rubbing that brush against the gum paste. Okay, so now we're going to work on our floral tape calyx. And how I start by is I just make pieces about maybe, I don't know, 3 inches long, maybe 2.5, something like that. And I'm sticking them together. Now, I'm not using anything to stick them together. They're just going to stick together just by the fact that they have, they already have glue on them or wax. So that's basically the adhesive, because I want a rather thick piece. And of course this is not, if it doesn't work out right away, just make as many as you can that will. Okay, because that seems to be working. And I can actually cut 2 out of these here. So we're going to be doing 5 pieces, or cutting out 5 pieces. Maybe the other way will want to stick better. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I want kind of a ragged edge. So I'm going to just leave that ragged edge, but I'm going to cut kind of a leaf shape. And I actually like that ragged edge right there. And I'm just gonna snip, as you would see on a calyx for a rose. They're rather raggedy, so I would say the more ragged they are, the better. I'm just going to curve them a bit. So now we have 3. And I do have extra. I can always use them for another rose. Ooh, uh-oh. Okay, we'll just move on to this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of piping gel as glue. And I'm going to glue 2 pieces together. And then I'm going to put those 2 on first, and I'm going to glue those with piping gel. Oop. I find that piping gel works a lot better than just plain water. Okay, so then I want to see how the other ones play out. Okay, so we've got this here. And this here. And then another way you could do it, which is probably a lot easier, is just dab a few little spots with piping gel and then put it on your flower. Okay. So then, if you look at it from the side, and you could ruffle them up. Once they're dry, you can kind of manipulate them and all that. But it really adds to the look of it. It has like that nice green to it at the bottom, and it really does look like it has a big calyx on it. And the great thing about it is that you're not going to worry that this calyx will break. It'll just mold itself to whatever. And that's what I like about it so much, is that it's not going to break, and it looks great. So, and then you can decide to add a rose leaf to it, and it's just going to complete the look. All right, well, thank you for watching, and have fun with your English rose.